So I thought I would really kind of yield the majority of the manager's report to the an update on what's happening at the Bow Main intersection. And this has been kind of an all-staff effort. Brett is the face of it right now, but Brett and Caroline Pelletier, the assistant town manager, Earl, Public Works Director, the Police Chief, Nate Goodman, and the Fire Chief, Bob Bernard, have all been working behind the scenes. So, oh, and our assessor has been working to get us good pictures. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Brett, and you're going to walk us through this, and I'm going to try to keep up with you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sophie. I'm Brett Richardson. I'm the Development Director with the town, and I'm here to share an update on the Main and Bow intersection, including some of the data that we gathered in advance of the installation, so we can compare it to a few days of data since the installation's been in place. So if we want to go to the next slide. The real quick update on where this idea came from. I guess first of all, here is a vision that was built off the downtown vision of 2022, and then the next iteration from Jeff Speck as part of the Village Corridor Initiative, which is our partnership with Maine DOT to look at the Route 1 corridor from essentially Maine Beer Company north up to Upper Mass Landing Road, to look at potential build-outs around that area, and then to make sure that we're designing a transportation corridor that meets the needs of everybody in our community. And there's been goals that the community has gathered a lot of input on to slow traffic, to have it be bike and pedestrian friendly, while still maintaining that vehicle throughput and access for public safety and delivery vehicles. So coming out of the presentation in June that many of you were at, this is sort of a vision of a gathering place at Main and Bow, which is considered sort of the heart of downtown. And so the trial that we're doing, as you see here, it tightens the intersection up quite a bit. It eliminates turning lanes and sort of prioritizes public space to activate the downtown, which is a primary goal of the downtown vision, where the retail base was in transition, and we were looking to pivot to a new future. Activating the downtown, the heart at Main and Bow is considered a priority, and so we're testing ideas to see what works, how much public space we can gather without impacting public safety and travel times. So that's the vision. That's what we're testing to see if we can approximate that. Stantec, global engineering firm, helped with the design. Some comments about that in a minute. Speck Dempsey, big planning firm, that Jeff Speck was here and did a great presentation back in June. Maine DOT is helping us out with the design. It's important to note as well that this partnership is designed to create a vision of the corridor that's buildable, and then we'll go with DOT as the town and go out and fundraise for that and leverage resources to actually build it. So having DOT at the table early is really a valuable partner. And then, of course, town staff. Sophie already talked about everybody from public safety to assessing who's involved in this. So that's our team who's been working on it. We can switch to the next slide. Update on how we got here. Downtown Vision 2022, a lot of public input identified this design as something to strive for. We brought this idea with Stantec's design and DOT's input to the Complete Streets Committee back in July. It's their purview to make sure that we're addressing the streets for multi-users and safety. Had a conversation with the council in July and then in early August, where they endorsed a rapid trial to try something this fall. DOT approved it. We collected data from August 18th to August 28th. We'll talk about the methodology and the data points that we gathered towards the end of August in a minute. And then on Tuesday the 9th, with DOT gear, the town really has had $0 out of pocket for this. This is important. This is a really cost-effective test because DOT provided the equipment. Installed on Tuesday, a week ago today, actually. And then, if you've noticed or paid attention, there's been some updates as we've learned that design, quite frankly, wasn't wide enough. It didn't accommodate buses. It didn't accommodate public safety vehicles. It didn't accommodate delivery trucks. And so Earl and his team We're really responsive to widen the intersection, which will show some images in a minute, what the changes have been, to widen turning angles and make it more convenient and accessible for all the users that we need to serve. Next slide, please. So here's the original design. Essentially, three-way stops. I'm sure many of you have seen it, the delineators, essentially eliminating the turning lanes. And the purpose of this test really is not to suggest what that's going to look like, but just to determine if the traffic will flow appropriately and if public safety can be maintained. So what we see on the ground today is not remotely close to what it would look like. We're just trying to determine if it functions and operates well. That's what the purpose of this trial is. So that's the original design, and we'll show the changes that we've made in rapid response to the input and the challenges that we've encountered. Next slide, please. So I'm not sure if you guys can see that, but for a key, the red circles are the delineators that have been removed. The green lines are now where the new end of the reclaimed lanes are, and then the blue is the current bus stop, which will be moved down to boat, bike, and ski next week to create some more space. So essentially, the design that Stantec provided was too tight. School buses couldn't get through, delivery trucks couldn't get through, people were bumping into things, it was inconvenient. And so Earl and his team, 4 days in a row over the weekend, went out there and removed, adapted, made changes. And since we've made these changes, we've now seen 18-wheelers go through, we've seen school buses make the turn, we've seen delivery trucks be accommodated, and the traffic seems to be flowing. So just to be clear, we're working hard on this to make sure that we're learning, because it is a trial and the design had some shortcomings, but from that, we've learned how to make it better. So that's where we're at today, is it seems to be, all the key stakeholders may not be thrilled, but they're meeting their needs. Next slide, please. And so the key data point that we measured, and we got input from Stantec and DOT on what to measure and how, was, does, and always stop work for traffic flow. And so we gathered data in advance 3 times a day for 10 days at the end of August. And the key point, three data points: how many folks were making left-hand turns, because when folks make a left-hand turn, that interrupts the other lanes from moving, and so you get cars that queue up to a certain extent. How many pedestrian crossing events happened, how many groups of people crossed the street. Again, that means the cars stop, and that creates potential for car queues. So left-hand turns, pedestrian crossings, and then car queues. How many 2-car queues? I guess we can go to the next slide with the methodology. How many 2-car queues, how many 3-car queues, how many 4-car queues, or how many long queues, five cars or more. And we did this in 45-minute increments. 15 minutes at northbound Route 1, 15 minutes at southbound Route 1, 15 minutes at Bow Street. And the idea was to keep this relatively simple so that the person gathering data could focus on a few simple points to try to minimize human error. There's a lot going on. If you looked at the whole thing at one time, you could get confused. We really want to do a good job with a simple data set. So that's how we gather data. And you'll see we did pre-trial, and then we've had a chance over the past few days to gather data since it's been installed, and we'll compare tonight so you can see that. Next slide, please. So here's the counts. 4 counts at 11 a.m. We started just at 2 and 3 from 18th of August to the 21st, and then we shifted the 2 p.m. counts to 11 a.m. counts, because what we noticed was that at 2 and at 3, they were very similar. We weren't really learning much in terms of differentiation. And so what we did is we shifted the 2 p.m. counts to a different time of day to see, okay, what's happening some other time when we're not paying attention. So we had 4 counts at 11 a.m., 4 counts at 2 p.m., and then 7 counts at 3 p.m. It's important to note, too, that we paid attention to the high school releases after school was in session on September 3rd, September 4th, and September 8th. And there were really clear patterns about what happens between 2:20 and 2:45. You probably have all experienced it. Next slide, please. So here, if you guys can see that, here's sort of the pre-trial data summary. So there's a lot of folks crossing Bow Street. We had in 15-minute increments, roughly 40 interruptions of traffic, either a pedestrian or a left-hand turn. And then in a 15-minute interval, we averaged between 3 and 5.5 two-car queues, so 2 cars lined up. That drops a little bit down to between 1.3 and close to 3 for 3 cars. 4 cars drops a little bit less. We're down to 1 to 1.5 cars. 11 a.m. not as busy as the afternoon. And then we wanted to understand how many interruptions does it take, how many people crossing the street, how many left-hand turns does it take to start to queue cars up. So that's what we gathered. Quite a bit, for a 5-car queue. In terms of a two-car queue, say that fast, 2-car queue, you get, 2 or 3 interruptions and you start to get a car back up. So that's the pretrial data. And again, as I mentioned, from 2:25 to 2:45 in the afternoon when the high school gets out, it's pretty backed up. That's a 20-minute window where it's pretty congested. But we found consistently that around 2:45 that starts to clear out. So that was validated, and it continues to be validated today. So that's something that's before the trial, and it would take some really smart traffic engineers to solve that problem if it's even solvable. It might be just 2:25 to 2:45. So we got a couple more slides. That's the pre-trial. And then the post-trial, we've had, I think, 3 days to count that. We did, next slide, please. So this is the preliminary, this is after 3 days. And what we're finding is the 2-car queues have gone up a little bit, 5 and 5.7 in a 15-minute interval. And then dropping just like the other data did. So a little bit higher, not quite double, but still pretty manageable. We had the planner from Maine DOT out today, and his assessment was essentially, now that Earl and his team have made these changes, opened the intersection up, we're getting delivery trucks through, school buses can navigate it. Again, they're not thrilled. Let's be honest, they're not thrilled. They're not going to try and sugarcoat it, but they can get through. And we have an opportunity, if we move forward with this trial, to learn from it. And then once we get to a design phase, we can incorporate these learnings into a design, so we can kind of split the difference and have wider turning lanes and address these concerns.
Can I ask about the data for a second?
Sure, of course.
So if I'm reading in the second column there, the average vehicle queue in a 15-minute interval at 11 a.m., that's an incidence of 5 times there were 2 cars backed up? Is that what the 5 means?
In 15 minutes.
In 15 minutes. The observation was there were 5 incidents where 2 cars were backed up.
Yep.
And it goes, obviously,
Yep.
follows that down. So, okay.
It's important to note, too, just at a logistical level, we have an always stop. So you have people coming up and moving around and taking their turn and predictability. So I've heard some observations that 2-car queue queues up, but it actually, if you're making a left off a Bow onto Main, you're probably getting faster. It's probably faster for you because you have a natural break in the traffic. That's some observations that we've heard. But to answer your question, John, that's a great summary of what this represents.
Hey, Brett, the third set of numbers on the right, average traffic interruptions per queue.
Yep.
What is that telling us?
I'm not sure if it's all that valuable, but what we did was an interruption refers to either a car making a left-hand turn, which under the former current baseline with all the turning lanes, that can create a queue if somebody's backed up behind somebody making a left. Or as that car starts to make a left and other activities happening, if they pause, as the intersection opens up, that leads to queues in other areas as well. So the interruption results reverse to a car making a left-hand turn, which interrupts traffic in some way, or a pedestrian crossing a crosswalk, which also sort of interrupts traffic as folks pause to let that clear.
The pretrial numbers, there was like 98
Yep.
interruptions per queue, and now it's 10. So
Yep.
is that significant, or am I missing something?
I think that's because the pretrial happened when downtown was quite full.
Was busier?
Was a lot busier.
Is there a way, and the answer might be no, but is there a way to measure the time it takes to actually get through the intersection? Because I understand we're measuring how many times cars are in a queue, but it might be that I'm in a queue, but I'm still able to make the left turn faster.
Yeah, we can measure that going forward. Yep, when we talked with DOT and Stantec, everybody agreed that in this instance, in this type of project, that the traditional way to measure whether we're seriously degrading traffic flow is how many cars queue, right? So this is informative, but the real important metric from what we designed the study for is the one in the middle.
Okay, thanks.
But to answer your question, with more time on the trial, that's the type of thing that we can do. And we've got some anecdotal information that suggests that the queues might be a little bit more, but in many instances, the travel time isn't dramatically impacted outside that 2:20 to 2:45 on a school day afternoon. I think we've got one or two more slides that just simply puts them side by side. So this is a comparison. So, 2-car queue at 11 goes from 3 pre-trial to 5 2-car queues post-trial. At 3 p.m., it goes from 5.4 2-car queues to 5.7, pretty similar. It goes from 1.3 to 2.1 in a 15-minute increment, and then 2.6 to 3.3. So half a queue in a 15-minute increment. Those are the big ones to pay attention to. So there is, a somewhat of an increase. The DOT's planner's perspective today was, this looks pretty good to me. I was concerned that we would see cars southbound backed up to School Street. He didn't see that at all. He was concerned that northbound, he would see cars, backed up down past the Oyster Bar. He never saw that. And so his anecdotal observation was this appears to be working. I consider this trial a success. Was his takeaway. So just to round it out too, so we've talked with public safety, and the input that we've received is that this trial does not constitute a public safety issue. There's no real concerns about public safety. We've been in touch with the school district around what the impacts are for their busing routes. And they can make the turns now, is my understanding, but there is paying attention to the time going forward. They're on a tight schedule to keep their logistics moving and to get the kids picked up and to their homes on time. And so, we'll have to continue to pay attention to that and work with them to address any concerns as they learn more and we get deeper into the trial. We've been in touch with many of the larger businesses in town with delivery trucks, and none of the truck drivers are thrilled about it, but it's now in a position where we can navigate it. And if we go back to that slide of the changes that we made, these are learnings within 4 days, right? Quick adaptations that Earl and his team have made that we can now kick back to the engineers, and we can now design for this, and we can now accommodate these learnings into future changes. And it's important to note as well that when we talked about this with the council previously, the idea was to do something simple, fast, and cheap in the fall and learn from it and come back, recognizing that it's not peak season, that we've got peak traffic typically in July and August, and that to truly assess whether something like this works, we've got to see it in action in the peak season. And so the idea is to learn here, learn from it, improve, come back spring, summer, in the peak season and see what else we learn, or move on to partnering with the DOT to raise money to start to build stuff.
It might be fair to say, however, 1 week ago on Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, before the changes were made, one could make a case that there was an issue with public safety because radiuses were not always manageable, for instance.
Yeah, going into it, the discussions, I think, going back to the downtown vision through the partnership with DOT, the reason that we've really isolated to traffic flow was that there's an assumption that by narrowing lanes, the pedestrian safety improves, that by reclaiming space, the downtown opportunities expand. And so we'll need to test that more fully with a demonstration project. But the idea, there are some assumptions that there will be public safety benefits and downtown vitality benefits. But it's only worth going there if the traffic is reasonably manageable. And so that's really what we're trying to understand, is it manageable?
So if I look at a complex situation like this, I sort of go immediately to the edges, which is there something that could hurt us that we just haven't seen? And so that's what this makes sense to be doing, testing in this way. And I don't know how you don't know what you don't know. In other words, I'd hate to be blindsided by something that we just didn't anticipate. I came up Route 1 to get to this meeting today, and I noticed the traffic flow on Route 1 was not uncommonly very high because there was an accident on Interstate 95. So that's an example of something that you don't, it's a tornado that's just come through.
Yeah, I think actually the bus situation came to somewhat of a head today, and there was input over time. The engineers were pretty confident that there was enough space with that original design to have the tour buses that pull over in front of the flagship L.O. Bean store, as well as the Breeze Metro buses that serve the region, that there'd be adequate space for them to pull over, drop folks off, load up, and still have the southbound Route 1 traffic going through. It's not working. We're not going to sugarcoat it. So what we're going to do, and all the partners and the stakeholders are on board with moving this during this trial before we can design a more full and thorough solution, will be to shift the bus stops down in front of Boat, Bike, and Ski where there's more space. It's sort of south of the trial area, so there's a little more wiggle room for folks to get around each other. And then we can design for a more thorough solution that meets the needs of the downtown businesses and our regional transit partner in the future. So, to that point, we're still learning, and I think, we're open about that.
Would that bus stop move be permanent, do you anticipate?
I think not at this time. I think there's a lot of further discussion. The tour buses are clearly a real asset to the community, and there's a long-standing habit to drop off and to bring folks in, and it's a real asset that we got to really take care of. It's good for the downtown businesses. It's good for our community. So we have to. That's a more thorough partner-based process to get to a good outcome.
So, Brett, I would like you to just walk through real quick. We did have an accident here, and what we did to address that so it wouldn't happen again, or shouldn't happen again.
Yep. So yesterday afternoon, I think it was, a commercial box truck came through an intersection and clipped one of the stop signs that then fell over into a car going by. And so we had that discussion. Is this what does this mean? Is this a deal breaker? Is it over? And we were able to make some changes and some adjustments to spacing and location to minimize that from happening again. And I think going forward, I'm not going to put words in the public director's mouth, but I think the idea is that we can figure out a creative and cost-effective solution to anchor those stop signs a little better. The beauty of them now is that, again, we're learning and we want to be able to move stuff as we learn to adapt and adjust. And that once we're now building more confidence in the current design, that we can put some more weight on those stop signs, and they won't be as malleable, so to speak.
You talked about the timing issue with the buses. I imagine that part of that is that they, in the past, have had that right turn lane and the right of way to, when they go from Moore Street to Mass Landing, they can all just stay nose to tail all the way down, and now they're being pulsed out and having to wait for everyone else at that intersection. Has there been a conversation around public safety with any concern about timing of getting equipment through that intersection and to the north end of town or the east side of town?
Yeah, for sure. That's a key consideration, right? That's front and center. We want to make sure that we can still continue to meet the needs of the community. And there was a fire call over the weekend. There's a data point where the truck driver, had some delays because there's less space for cars to get out of the way. But, we think that there's some adaptations to that can alleviate that pressure. We can design for that when we get to the final design to create some more flex in the way that these work. Luckily, we have lots of real estate with these turning lanes, right? And so we don't have to try to make the perfect the enemy of the good. We don't need to try to be really aggressive with how much space we put into sidewalk, right? There's room there to really amplify the turning lanes and make sure everybody's comfortable making those turn lanes and still have some really great downtown spots that fulfill the vision that the community's embraced. And so we think that in the near term, we've heard as late as 5 p.m. today that there's no major concerns from a public safety standpoint. And we know long-term that that's a priority and we can design for it.
I know LL Bean has participated in the conversation around this via Complete Streets. Have you had updated conversations with LL Bean in terms of how they're sensing this is impacting traffic on their part?
Almost daily, yeah. That's we've been on the phone a lot. Hey, how's it going? Is this working? What are we learning? What's the impacts? And so last few days, almost daily. And it's a learning curve, the jury's still out, frankly. We're not ready to declare victory, but they're obliging it and are open to it and haven't seen that I've heard any major impacts. That said, we need to move the buses. We need to move the buses, and we're going to do that. All the partners are involved on that and supportive of that move, and so we're going to expedite that. Breeze has it in their work plan to do it, and been in touch with Visit Freeport to put the word out to the tour buses to let them know that we're moving it south. It's nothing new. It was done a couple years ago when the flagship facade was being worked on. These buses were moved down to boat, bike, and ski. So we're just pulling an old trick out of the hat, and we'll adapt to that.
Can you remind folks when this iteration will end?
Yeah, it's designed to be an 8 to 10 week trial, and that's weather dependent. So that takes us into early November basically. But if we see big forecasts that are going to create issues for snow removal, then we can end it sooner. But it's really an 8-week trial to determine, again, we're not trying to solve every problem. We're trying to narrow our design options. And the next step for the consultants, once we learn from this, is they're going to be sharing with the town at the end of September a current conditions report for what they've seen on Route 1, traffic, collisions, pedestrian amenities, gaps in the infrastructure. We're going to have that in September. We'll learn from this, and then the conversation will shift to the next steps. Here are some different things we could do. But this is key because it helps us understand if the community can support something like this. It helps us learn together whether or not this is the road we want to go down. And it's all DOT equipment, so it's a pretty cost-effective way to learn. And I think from a staff level, we all appreciate the community's patience as we do this.
Could you actually go through the solution to making way for an emergency vehicle that needs to get through town quickly with such narrow roadways? In other words, what is the solution to that? Because that strikes me as important.
You could go around, right? You could go west.
Folks,
Yeah, I mean, that's a conversation that
we'll
we
let,
had.
we'll let Brett finish his presentation, and then we'll have time for public comment during the public comment section of the agenda.
That's a conversation that we had with public safety, and there's different ways to do it. I'm not going to put words into, that's not my profession. I used to drive a truck. I've got a Class B. I've driven around Freeport. I understand what it means to have tight intersections, and this is my experience, having been in that space for a few years, is that the first time a truck driver gets in a situation where they're uncomfortable, where it's unsafe, and they're in a pinch point, they're very quickly going to adapt and figure out a different way to get there. That's how they operate. They're problem solvers.
Truck drivers are warned on the highway that they need to get off at the next exit if they are a certain height. And I wonder if signage, it's complicated because too many signs in the town could not be observed, but I'm just wondering about that.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question because I think it's important to note that this idea might be as old as 2022, but this trial is literally a week old. Yeah, and we've learned a lot and adapted a lot from the original design that was plopped on our desk to where it's at now. So I think that process will continue.
Good.
I just want to echo a statement you had of just really thanking folks for their patience and writing. We've gotten a ton of feedback, which is what this is for. Whether it's good, bad, happy or not, we want it. This is how we make sure it works or it doesn't work. And I know it's not pretty right now, but it'll never look like this again. So thank you, everybody, for your patience on this. Councillor Egan.
Thanks. I just want to point out, I didn't know that our economic development director had such transportation engineering chops, or maybe they're just recently acquired. So well done explaining that, and thank you for being the front of this and handling all of the dynamics. I think you've done an excellent job at that. And I guess I go back to something you said earlier, Brett, which really resonates with me, in that change is hard, and not everybody's going to like this, and everyone's going to adopt their personal experience of going through this intersection with optimizing what should be done. And that's community input. And if we were to take another track and spend a fair amount of money on traffic engineering and civil engineering design work and have, let's say, 10 public hearings about what to do and have lots of diagrams and maps up there, we might reach a 51% consensus, maybe, about what would be the best one to do, and then go ahead and spend literally millions of dollars to build the intersection and find out it doesn't work. And so I think it's really critical to look at traffic engineering in live time with vehicles, with public safety, with delivery trucks, with school buses and tour buses. The only way to really understand how it's going to work is to do what we're doing and to try it out. And it's inconvenient, and it's itchy, and it's like, why are we doing this now? And I got to get to so-and-so by 2 o'clock, and I'm stuck here in this 5-car queue waiting for this stop sign. It's not that long. So I'm hopeful that we can have a little bit of patience with understanding about why we're doing it this way and the wisdom of that. And I think we could do, I wish we could have 4 or 5 of Brett's slides running on a big screen right next to that intersection so people can understand the why. Because I think everybody thinks this just fell off the moon and landed in downtown Freeport. What is going on? Many people are not paying attention to our meetings, despite how invigorating they are. So I'm curious if there's a way for us to get some signage up to explain, patience while we're learning. Traffic planning, takes time or something up there to just
We do have some political,
help explain
I
that.
didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
We do have some political signs that we're going to put out as early as tomorrow that have a
Fabulous.
QR code with the video and have some images and some.
So by political signs, you mean what people are normally used to seeing political signs put on,
wires
correct?
that go on the
All
road.
right, just double checking.
Structure, yeah. Great, thank you,
And I
Brett.
mean, we do have the right stakeholders involved, just to be very clear. I mean, Maine Department of Transportation is paying close attention to this, and that's huge. And, this is the result of lots of input on the downtown vision and with our Village Corridor Initiative. So, yeah, we're doing it. Thank you. Councilor Pilch.
I just want to add to what Councilor Egan said. I think it's important to reflect on the why, right? This didn't drop out of the sky saying, we'd really love to see a 3-way stop sign intersection at Bow and Main Street. This originated from the idea of having a more vibrant downtown, having more people walking up and down Main Street and across Main Street safely. And like John was saying, there's not an easy way to say, okay, let's just invest the money to make all the changes and call it done. We need to figure out what the right steps are to get there. It might look like part of this. It might look like something completely different. Doubt we'll see a roundabout, but you never know. Like, there are all different kinds of things that could come into play. So this is one of the things that we're testing to say how much of this is working, how much of it is not working. The one thing I'm relatively sure of is that whatever comes out of this effort, it will probably not be yellow plastic pylons in the middle of the road making, I don't think that's the solution. So when we get to public comment, which I think is coming up shortly, it's interesting to know that you hate it or you love it. It's much more helpful to know that, hey, I tried to do this and this is where I got stuck and it was this particular lane I was coming in and that was where I got delayed. So the more specific feedback you have, the more helpful it will be for us as we go forward to figuring it out. So
Yeah, and I know staff is making sure that there's a collection method, so we don't lose any comment that we've received via mail, phone call here tonight as well. So we'll make sure we have it. Any other questions for Brett? Okay, great. Anything else from the manager? Oh, no. Oh, no, okay. All right, so